When German police entered the rented apartment in suburban Krakow, they expected to find a suicide. The body on the bed, female, early 20s, showed no immediate signs of struggle. A half-packed suitcase stood by the window, but the bruising under her jaw told another story. By nightfall, the suspect's name was already circulating across 2 countries. Thomas Keller, 42, married, father of 2, missing since the weekend. Just 6 months earlier, Thomas's life had appeared ordinary. He lived in Essen, worked as a logistics supervisor at a steel supply company, paid his mortgage, and took his kids to football practice on Saturdays. Nothing suggested that he would abandon everything for a woman he had never met. It began innocently enough in August 2023. On a small forum for photography enthusiasts, under the username Skytrail87, Thomas posted landscapes taken during his business trips. Among the comments, one stood out: "Beautiful colors, feels peaceful." Eliza's. Her profile showed a young woman from Poland, 24, with shoulder-length blonde hair and a soft smile. She wrote in simple English, peppered with emojis, often commenting about nature, light, and clouds. Thomas replied, flattered by her warmth. Within days, they moved their chats to Messenger. To his wife, Miriam, he said it was just a friend interested in cameras. But within weeks, late-night messages became daily rituals. Eliza sent photos of cats, forests, and breakfasts. Thomas responded with sunsets from his office window. The intimacy crept in slowly. She called him Tom. He called her Sunbeam. At home, the distance was measurable. Miriam noticed him smiling at his phone during dinner, pretending to check work emails. Their 10-year-old daughter asked why Dad stayed up so late. Thomas dismissed it with tired humor. Deadlines never sleep. Inside, he justified everything. He had been faithful for 15 years. This wasn't betrayal, just connection. Eliza listened without judgment when he spoke about exhaustion, about feeling invisible. Her sentences were short, sometimes grammatically awkward, but always kind. "You work too much, you need be happy too." That simple phrasing, naive yet affectionate, became addictive. Over months, Thomas built an image of Eliza that filled every void. She was pure, gentle, uncomplicated. When she mentioned her health problem, he brushed past it, assuming anxiety or chronic fatigue. "I am slow sometimes," she wrote once, "but I try my best." He saw humility where there was innocence, mystery where there was literal meaning. By December 2023, they were speaking daily through voice messages. She giggled often, her speech slightly delayed, with an unmistakable childlike rhythm. Thomas never asked why. Instead, he idealized it. She's just different, untouched by cynicism. He began sending gifts, a phone tripod, a Polaroid camera, postcards from German cities. Eliza's replies overflowed with gratitude. "Tom, you are best friend I ever have." In late January 2024, Miriam discovered an open chat on Thomas's laptop. A string of hearts, a plan for a future together. The confrontation was quiet but final. "If you're unhappy," she said, "just go." 2 days later, Thomas packed a single suitcase and left. He withdrew $3,000 from joint savings and bought a one-way ticket to Krakow. His colleagues assumed he had taken early vacation. His children stopped hearing from him. To Eliza, he wrote, "I'm finally coming, no more distance." She responded with a flurry of emojis and one simple line, "I wait you, Tom. I so happy." On Furies, February 10th. Thomas crossed the Polish border by train. The plan was simple. Meet her, stay a week, decide the rest later. Eliza sent the address of a small guest house near Wieliczka. Her parents owned a bakery nearby, she said. She would meet him at the station wearing a red coat. Witnesses later recalled seeing a German man pacing by the arrivals gate, holding a bouquet of roses. When a young woman approached, round-faced, slightly unsteady in her walk, eyes bright but unfocused, he froze. She waved eagerly. "Tom, I hear." That was the first time he saw that Eliza had Down syndrome. For a few seconds, he didn't move. The entire fantasy, the voice, the photos, the imagined partner, collapsed into shock. She ran forward and hugged him. He remained stiff, expression blank. Later that evening, Eliza's mother, Magda, invited him for dinner at their home. The table was simple: soup, bread, laughter. Eliza sat close, occasionally touching his hand, proud to show her boyfriend from Germany. Thomas smiled mechanically. Magda noticed his unease but misread it as shyness. "She talk about you every day," she said. "You make her very happy." He nodded, barely swallowing the food. Inside, resentment brewed, a grotesque mix of embarrassment and self-pity. He had left everything for this? He had ruined his life for someone. Like this? That night, back in his rented room, Thomas opened his messages. Miriam had sent a single photo, their kids playing in the snow. No caption, just a reminder of what he had traded for a fantasy. He stared at it for minutes before locking his phone. Eliza messaged, "You safe in hotel? I think of you. Tomorrow I show you my city." He typed, "We need to talk," and deleted it, then typed again, "See you tomorrow." Sleep never came. The hotel cameras later recorded him, pacing the hallway at 2:17 a.m., smoking near the fire exit, his face pale, restless. He searched online for train tickets back to Germany, then for how to cancel foreign booking without refund. By morning, he had decided to leave quietly. But when he stepped outside, Eliza was already there, waiting by the car with 2 coffees. She had arrived early, dressed neatly, her red coat buttoned wrong. "Good morning, Tom." She handed him the cup with a trembling smile. He forced a grin, accepted it, and followed her to the park. She talked excitedly about plans, the salt mines, the bakery, a picnic. He heard none of it. Every word felt heavier. When she reached for his arm, he recoiled. She looked confused. "You angry?" No, he muttered. "Just tired." Her eyes watered instantly. "I sorry, I make you sad?" He shook his head, turned away, but the guilt only deepened the fury. Somewhere between pity and self-disgust, something fractured. At 3:12 p.m., he texted his wife for the last time. "I made a mistake. Don't look for me." By 7 p.m., Magda received a call from the guest house owner. Thomas hadn't checked out, but his room was empty. Eliza hadn't returned home either. The next morning, a hiker found a phone and a blood-stained scarf near the riverbank 2 kilometers away. When authorities entered the abandoned cabin nearby, they found Eliza's body partially covered with a blanket. No sexual assault, no theft. Only rage, swift, unplanned. Thomas's fingerprints were everywhere. On the glass, the suitcase, the scarf. Interpol issued a cross-border alert within hours. Back in Essen, Miriam turned on the news and saw her husband's photo under the headline, "German man wanted in Polish homicide of disabled woman." Her knees gave out before the reporter finished the sentence. 3 days later, Polish authorities found Thomas Keller's rental car abandoned near the outskirts of Bochnia. The keys were still in the ignition, a half-empty water bottle rolling under the passenger seat, and traces of mud on the floor mats that didn't match the area where the vehicle was parked. The local police contacted the German consulate immediately. By evening, Thomas's photo had spread across every Polish news channel, the story of a man who left his family for an online romance that ended in a brutal killing. The headlines were lurid. father of 2 kills, girlfriend with Down syndrome. But the reality inside the investigation rooms was quieter, almost clinical. Inspector Joanna Wilczek, who had led dozens of homicide cases before, found this one unsettling in a different way. There was no robbery, no drugs, no sexual motive. Everything about the scene felt personal, almost intimate, as if rage had collided with shame. The autopsy confirmed strangulation. No defensive wounds, no prolonged fight, just a short, violent moment. Eliza's fingernails still had traces of red paint, slightly chipped. She had done them that morning. Beside the body, the police found a folded note, written in uneven English. "I'm sorry if I make you sad." It was the last thing Eliza ever wrote. Interpol traced Thomas's last ATM transaction to a small station near the Slovak border. CCTV showed him buying a ticket to Vienna. He looked disheveled, wearing the same jacket seen in Polish surveillance footage. After that, the trail went dark. For nearly a week, he became a ghost, crossing borders with cash, no phone, no cards, and no plan. Back in Essen, his wife Miriam was questioned by the Bundeskriminalamt. She sat motionless for most of the interview. "He wasn't a violent man," she kept repeating. "He was weak, yes, but never violent." The investigators didn't argue. They knew that in many cases like this, violence came not from strength but from collapse, when a man's fantasy implodes and he cannot bear what it says about himself. Through mutual cooperation between German and Polish police, they built a rough timeline. On February 10th, Thomas arrived in Krakow. On the 11th, he met Eliza. On the 12th, he killed her. Between the 13th and 15th, he crossed south toward Slovakia. Every movement, they noticed, followed rural routes. No highways, no border control cameras. Someone desperate to vanish, but not professional enough to truly disappear. Forensic analysis of his belongings gave small glimpses into his mind. The notebook found in his luggage contained phrases written in German and English, fragments of self-pity, regret, and confusion. "I ruined my life for a dream." Another line, "She tricked me." Then, underneath, written hastily, "Or maybe I tricked myself." The investigators could not tell if he had written it before or after the murder. Meanwhile, media attention intensified. In Poland, Eliza's story became a national discussion about online safety and the exploitation of people with disabilities. Her parents, Magda and Richard, appeared briefly on a local broadcast. Magda spoke softly, tears held back by exhaustion. She believed everyone was kind. That was her gift, she said. "We tried to protect her, but she wanted to live like everyone else." Her husband sat beside her, silent, eyes fixed on the floor. For the next several days, leads surfaced and died in rhythm. Someone claimed to have seen a man resembling Thomas near the Hungarian border, another at a bus terminal in Vienna. Each sighting drew police teams into motion, but none led to him. It was as if shame itself had erased his trail. Then, on February 23rd, Austrian authorities detained a disoriented man in a small hostel near Graz. He had checked in under a false name, using his German ID partially torn at the edge. The receptionist grew suspicious when she saw his photo on a local news site. When the police arrived, Thomas did not resist. He simply looked at them and said, "I know why you're here." During interrogation, his tone oscillated between calm and confusion. He didn't deny the killing. "I went there because I thought she was real," he said. "Not like the others. She made me feel alive again." The officer asked what happened in the cabin. Thomas paused, eyes hollow. "I couldn't breathe when I saw her. Everything I imagined disappeared. I tried to tell her it was a mistake, but she kept smiling. I told her to stop. She wouldn't stop. The silence that followed stretched until the officer spoke again. "So you killed her because she had Down syndrome?" Thomas stared at the wall. "I killed her because she reminded me of myself," he said softly. "Broken. Not what I wanted to see." Psychiatrists who later examined him called it narcissistic collapse. Years of quiet resentment, an unfulfilled marriage, the illusion of control, all compressed into one fragile fantasy. When the illusion shattered, his mind turned the disgust inward, then outward. It was the most cowardly kind of violence, the destruction of another life to silence one's own failure. Back in Krakow, investigators reconstructed the final day in detail. The two had walked through the park, then stopped near an old wooden shed by the riverbank. Witnesses heard raised voices, then nothing. 10 minutes later, Thomas was seen alone, heading toward the road. He stopped once, looking back. The forensic timeline suggested the killing happened within that small gap, between impulse and retreat. The German prosecutor's office agreed to extradite Thomas to Poland for trial. The case drew widespread coverage not because of its brutality, but because of its psychological absurdity. A man so desperate for affection that when faced with unconditional love, he responded with murder. While awaiting trial in a Krakow detention center, Thomas refused visitors except one, a prison chaplain. Their conversations were brief. "Do you feel remorse?" the chaplain asked. "I feel empty," Thomas replied. "Remorse would mean there's something left." As the investigation unfolded, new details painted a clearer picture of his mental disintegration. Former colleagues described him as withdrawn in his final months at work. He had started printing photos of Eliza, showing them to a coworker and calling her his new beginning. He'd stopped wearing his wedding ring weeks before leaving Germany. He told one friend, "I think I finally met someone who sees me." None of them suspected anything dangerous, only a midlife man chasing a delusion of romance. Digital forensics revealed that Thomas had edited most of Eliza's photos himself. He downloaded them, adjusted lighting, cropped out family members, and even smoothed her features in Photoshop. Investigators found entire folders titled "Our Future," filled with manipulated images of them together. It wasn't reality he loved, but the simulation of it. When the truth appeared in front of him, the lie couldn't survive. Eliza's funeral took place on a quiet Saturday in March. Her parents requested no press, no cameras, only close family and friends. White lilies covered the small coffin. Her brother read a short message. She believed in kindness, and that was never her fault. In the back row, an investigator from the German consulate stood silently, holding a single rose, one of the same type Thomas had carried when he first arrived. Inside his cell, Thomas read about the funeral in a newspaper. He folded the page neatly and placed it under his pillow. The guards later found him staring at the ceiling for hours, unblinking. In his notebook, another entry appeared. "She forgave me before she died. I saw it in her eyes. I can't forgive myself." Psychologists debated whether this was delusion or guilt. Either way, the words carried a chilling calm. He wasn't trying to justify himself anymore. He was only documenting the slow erosion of his own identity. The man who once blamed others for his emptiness was now dissolving in it. In the months leading to the trial, public interest in the case shifted from outrage to fascination. Documentaries, talk shows, and online debates tried to dissect what drove a man like Thomas Keller to such an act. Some saw it as a tragic collision between fantasy and disability. Others as pure misogyny wrapped in self-pity. Forensic experts called it a murder of disappointment. One headline captured it succinctly. "He didn't kill a woman, he killed the truth." The Polish prosecutor prepared to seek a life sentence. Thomas's defense planned to argue diminished capacity, citing emotional collapse and temporary psychosis. But nothing in his calm confessions supported insanity. He knew what he did. He just didn't know how to live with it. By summer, as the trial approached, a quiet unease settled over both families, the one mourning a daughter and the one mourning a man still alive but gone forever. Miriam refused to attend. She told reporters he died the moment he left home. The courtroom would soon become the final stage for a tragedy that began with a message and ended with silence. The trial began in late October 2024, inside a cold, gray courthouse in central Krakow. Rain fell steadily over the cobblestone streets as journalists gathered by the entrance, their cameras aimed at the armored van that brought Thomas Keller to the hearing. He stepped out in handcuffs, thinner, pale, head-shaved by prison routine. The flash of cameras didn't make him flinch. It was as if he had already accepted that the world would look at him only as a monster. And perhaps he agreed. Inside, the courtroom was quiet except for the hum of translation devices. Thomas's statements were delivered through an interpreter. Across the aisle, Eliza's parents sat side by side, holding hands so tightly their knuckles were white. Magda avoided looking at him, her gaze fixed on the small framed photo of her daughter the prosecutor had placed on the table. The trial would last 5 days, but for the families involved, it would stretch like an eternity. The prosecutor, Anna Liss, opened the case by recounting the sequence of events, the online communication, Thomas's trip from Germany, and the killing at the riverbank. Her voice stayed even, but each word landed like a weight. "He created a fantasy," she said. "When reality contradicted it, he destroyed the person who embodied it. This is not love, this is annihilation." The defense attorney, Martin Kruger, took another approach. He described Thomas as a man crushed by emotional exhaustion, who experienced a sudden psychological collapse triggered by shock and delusion. He did not arrive intending to kill, Kruger argued. He arrived searching for meaning, and what he found broke his mind. Thomas listened without reaction. When the judge asked if he wanted to address the court, he nodded slowly. His voice was low and monotone. "I wish I could say sorry," he began. "But sorry doesn't fit this. It's too small." He paused, searching for words. "I thought I was escaping a lie, but I was the lie. She only wanted to make me happy. I couldn't stand her kindness." Eliza's father suddenly rose, trembling. "Then why didn't you leave?" he shouted. "Why didn't you just go home?" The judge called for silence. Thomas looked down at his hands. "Because I didn't want to be seen as the man who ran from what he'd done to himself," he said. "So I became worse." Each day, the courtroom filled with the same faces: reporters, law students, a handful of curious locals. Outside, the story divided opinion. Some viewed him as a manipulative narcissist. Others saw the case as a warning about unchecked loneliness and online obsession. But inside the courtroom, none of that mattered. Only one fact mattered: a young woman was dead. Forensic experts testified that Eliza's injuries indicated no prolonged fight. She likely died within seconds. The act was spontaneous, the examiner stated. There was no evidence of premeditation or tools prepared in advance. The prosecution countered that spontaneity does not erase intent. "He could have walked away," said Liss. "He chose to end a life instead." On the third day, the court played a series of audio messages recovered from Eliza's phone. Her voice filled the room, bright, warm, innocent. "Tom, I make cookies for you," one recording said, followed by a small laugh. "I hope you like sweet." The sound lasted barely to 20 seconds, but when it stopped, the silence it left behind was unbearable. Even the judge took a moment before speaking again. Thomas covered his face with his hands. Whether it was guilt or exhaustion, no one could tell. Magda broke down quietly in her seat. Her husband reached for her shoulder, his own eyes wet. For the first time, the courtroom didn't feel like a trial. It felt like a memorial. Psychologists called by the court painted the same picture from different angles. Thomas, they said, was not insane, merely hollow. A man whose ego depended on the illusion of control. His online relationship gave him a version of love that required no compromise, no reflection. When faced with imperfection, with real humanity, he responded with violence, as if trying to erase his own vulnerability. He could not tolerate empathy, said one expert. To him, kindness was unbearable because it revealed everything he lacked. When closing arguments came, the defense repeated the plea for diminished responsibility, citing acute dissociative shock. The prosecution rejected it as moral cowardice dressed in clinical language. He planned the trip, packed his bags, crossed borders, Liss said firmly. He knew what he was doing. The only thing he didn't expect was to see himself, and he killed the mirror. The verdict arrived on the 5th day. The judge read slowly, her tone heavy but unwavering. Thomas Keller was found guilty of intentional homicide and sentenced to 25 years in prison, with no possibility of parole before 20. The courtroom was silent except for Magda's restrained sob. Thomas stood motionless, staring ahead. When the judge asked if he understood the sentence, he said only, "Yes." In the weeks that followed, the case faded from headlines, replaced by new stories, new crimes. But its shadow lingered. In Germany, discussions emerged about loneliness epidemics, about how digital intimacy was blurring the line between affection and projection. In Poland, advocacy groups began campaigns to better protect adults with disabilities who use social media. Eliza's name became a quiet emblem, not of tragedy, but of trust betrayed by selfishness. In prison, Thomas adjusted to a life measured by hours and routines. He worked in the laundry, ate in silence, spoke little. Occasionally, he received letters, not from his wife who had changed her address, but from strangers. Some cursed him, others asked why. He never replied. He spent most nights writing in his notebook, filling pages with fragmented reflections. One entry read, "Love is not when someone sees you the way you want to be seen. Love is when you face what you are and they stay." Months later, a prison guard found a folded drawing inside one of his books, a sketch of a girl with flowers in her hair. It was crude, but careful. At the bottom he had written, "She was better than my imagination." Magda visited Eliza's grave every Sunday, bringing fresh daisies. She talked to her softly, like to a sleeping child. "You were happy that week," she would whisper. "You said your dream was coming true." Maybe, for a few days it did. Her husband built a small wooden bench nearby so visitors could sit. Sometimes strangers left candles. Sometimes letters from parents who feared their children's innocence would one day meet the wrong kind of love. Life continued, though changed. The bakery reopened. The Hoffman case, as the newspapers called it, slowly became just another story archived in police files. But for the families, time didn't erase it. It only turned it into something quieter. The pain lost its sharpness, but it never left. A year later, a German journalist published a documentary on the case. It showed photos of Thomas's empty house, the deleted chats, and the single surviving audio from Eliza's phone, her laughter, brief and pure. The final line of the documentary read, "She believed she was loved. And for someone like her, that was never a mistake." Thomas watched it from his prison cell on a small communal TV. When it ended, he didn't move for a long time. The other inmates left, the room emptied, and he stayed seated, eyes unfocused. Later that night, the guards reported hearing him whisper a name over and over, softly, rhythmically, as if trying to remember how it sounded when she said it herself. Eliza.